Hello everyone joining in. As always, we'll wait for a couple of minutes before we start the show for today. All right. Okay, welcome all to this very special edition of PhD the Philosophical Drama. I am Amogh, Aparna, Maheshchandra, and me and my friend Sukanya together invite you and welcome you all. Yes, Sudha, I'm getting your request. I should have you in a bit on the show. So, today we have a very, very special guest. And before I introduce her, Steve Jobs once said that leadership is not that easy. And if you want to make everybody happy in the world, you should probably sell ice cream and not try being a leader. Uh, on today's edition of PhD the Philosophical Drama, we have a very, very special guest, Professor from IISER Pune. She's a deputy chair in the Department of Biology, and she's a very, very dear friend of all of us as her students in the institute. And today we are going to discuss with her story of PhD, and then look at how she went from being a PhD candidate to being a principal investigator to have students under her who are pursuing PhD at IISER Pune. So without further ado, let me just try and add Sudha to this call. Hello, Sudha.
Can you hear me?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect, perfect.
I had to get off the IISER internet and go on to 4G. I have no clue what's happening.
Oh, okay. But it's great to see you and great to have you on this show.
Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, first of all, for being a part of the show amidst your busy schedule.
It's a Sunday, so it's okay.
But I know you're really busy on Sundays as well. You're doing a lot of things in general. To start with, I want to take you a few years back and get you into that zone where you yourself were a PhD student. You've done your PhD at the National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi. If you want to just talk about that time of your life.
So yeah, I'll start off again by saying thanks to you, Sukanya, and you for getting me to be a part of this. This is very exciting, and yes, I'm gonna have to tap into a lot of my brain cells right now. And it's not a couple of years; it's a couple of decades. Though I would not really be a live show, but I am. That's the truth. So yeah, how did NII happen in my life? I did my BSc in. So Hyderabad has this triple major kind of a format. I did my BSc in microbiology, chemistry, and zoology, and was always very, very fascinated with immunology somehow. And that kind of got honed further when I did my master's. The master's degree says special zoology, but it's fundamentally a life science program without the plant science component to it. And this was in Madras University. And there we had a wonderful teacher called Mullainathan. And this man completely kind of got that spark of interest that I had for microbiology, microbial immunology. It even got even more honed into general immunology. And I was like, I'm going to do my PhD in applied immunology. And that was my kind of a thought I had, which made me think about labs in the country which might be doing that. But we didn't have that much access to internet, mind you. So it was more about going to institutes and then figuring out who were there and stuff like that. The National Institute of Immunology has immunology in the title itself.
Right.
So that is
Right.
how I ended up kind of having that big time on my radar. So went with a bunch of friends on this really fun trip. Absolutely tickets nahi mila last minute mein. So it was completely unreserved compartment for the first time in my life. Slept on the floor of a third tire, no? Non AC 3 tire. I slept
Right.
on the
Right.
floor. Great fun. Went, gave this interview, and I passed the first round. First round was a written test. So yeah, I went through to my second round and had a pretty unnerving experience, actually, very unnerving experience. You're surrounded by a whole panel of people, and this is in this one big boardroom looking like room. And I don't know, for some of you who know Professor Satyajit Rath, who is one of our colleagues right now in IISER, he
Right.
was also on the panel. And yeah, I just kind of somehow kept my cool. I was being myself, and it worked somehow. So I got through the PhD interview and ended up joining a very non-immunology lab for my PhD. So I think one of the important things for highlighting this whole immunology business and all of this thing is to say that you might have certain notions about what it is that you want to do in life, in your,
Right.
especially what it is that you want to do your PhD in, and it's built on, in many cases, not in all cases, some people have this extremely fantastic sort of opportunity to learn about a lot of things early on. And so they come with a very, very single-minded notion of what it is that they want to do very early on. I was not that person. I liked multiple things. Immunology just had this extra spark, and then Professor Mulainathan kind of did it for me, and with kind of sealing the deal in immunology. But when I went there, I got to know the only clinical immunologist, the only applied immunologist had moved to Dabur. And then the
Okay.
other three are hardcore basic immunologists. And that thing didn't excite me as much. Yeah. So whatever my notion of immunology was to work in an area of research that will directly lead to some translation. The kind of
Right.
research I do now is anything but translation. It's hardcore fundamental sciences, right? So all of these notions can get turned on your head, but I think it's extremely important to kind of reassess what you like and what might interest you, given the milieu that you have out there, and then rethink about what you might want. And that's how the immunology NII PhD happened, which was not in immunology. I'm a biochemist by training. I worked in the field of sickle cell anemia.
Right. Very exciting. But uh, going through the process, were you determined to do a PhD when you were doing your bachelor's, or was it like a very thought uh, decision, or ho raha hai, let's see what it is? It was like that. What
So
was it?
my life is a lot about going with the flow. I
Hmm.
I do not have any family member that has this kind of a background that kind of inspired me. Very early on, middle school, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a neurologist, a
Hmm.
neurosurgeon to be precise, not knowing
Okay.
what it meant, just heard about a few things here and there, read about a few things in the science library books and stuff. That kind of eventually slightly sort of amalgamated more into me realizing that I like science in general. There's no one particular thing
Hmm.
that excited me. It was just fundamental curiosity and wanting to understand how things worked. Of course, I had the slightly larger love for biology. Math, unfortunately, kind of my love for math till fifth, I was supposed to be awesome in math. I still have report cards which says 98 out of 100, 100 out of 100. Sixth and seventh, 2 consecutive years, this one sir, he keeps chabawing Jarda all the time. He comes, he teaches crap. He just sealed it for me. I started
Oh.
hating after that. He came for 2 consecutive years, and that's it. After that, nobody else could revive that kind of feeling that I developed for math, which is very unfortunate. Now we use a lot of math when we are collaborating with the modelers with
Hmm.
respect to what we do now. And a lot of learning has to be done again. And I had to unlearn the dislike that I developed for math. So that is a different side story. But having said that, yeah. What was the trail of thought? What was the original question here? I forget.
Like, was PhD a very thought
Right. Flow.
decision?
Loved science, wanted to continue in science. So 11th and 12th, very happily dropped math, took the pure BIPC as we called it in Hyderabad, and then went on to do my bachelor's in microbiology, chemistry, and zoology. After which I knew I wanted to do wanted to go through with the masters because I still continued to love science. I didn't know what else to
Right.
do, I guess. So I just said I'm going to go with the flow. And then as BSc third year happened, I was like, MSc ke baad kya? And then I was like, yeah, maybe you know what? I would love to, given that I have this intrinsically inquisitive nature for things, I felt like
Mm-hmm.
PhD is something I should give a genuine shot. And I should put one thing out there. When we were in undergrad and stuff like that, Hyderabad is one of the 6 top cities in the country. But despite
Mm-hmm.
that,
Right.
other than certain hotspots in the country, scientifically speaking, say Bangalore or Delhi, or in certain few institutes in the country, there was no notion of, or colleges in these cities, there was no real notion of um, semester projects or
Right. Right.
research projects. So my
Mm-hmm.
PhD didn't have a research component, my master's didn't have a research component. So it's literally like getting thrown in the deep end of the pool when you join PhD. And then I had to figure out then and there if this is something that I wanted to pursue or not. And
Right. Right.
I feel like you did your, I can't remember where you did your bachelor's and master's, but if it had a research component, that would have given you, like every student in IISER Pune, in principle, has the opportunity to experience this prior, and prior to exiting with a master's degree, knows whether they might be interested in doing a protracted thing in area of research or be in academia for such a long time, right? I didn't have any such thing. I
Yeah.
just, yeah, thrown
That
in the,
was the question because, as you said, ISER people do have that. I
yeah,
would say they are really blessed to have that environment around them. They can just walk into any lab and look at what research goes on in that lab in different fields, not just in
absolutely,
biology or in specifically in chemistry, or they can just do it across semesters in different fields and see what they are liking. So
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah. So, and also because you mentioned about that math professor, I'm not going to go to that math professor, but the importance of teachers and mentors in influencing you or driving your curiosity towards a particular subject is very important.
absolutely.
And after your PhD, you moved to US, had a wonderful postdoc stint, and what was it at that time? Because postdoc life, I'm doing a postdoc right now, so I know it's very shaky. You don't really know what's the future, what are you looking at exactly. Uh, what was your experience, and how important was having good mentors at that time?
Oh, yeah. So I need to backtrack a little bit because there's a bit of a story here, right? So I told you that my PhD was in biochemistry, yeah, fundamental
Mhm.
biochemistry. I was working on protein biochemistry, trying to understand why sickle cell hemoglobin behaved the way it did. Normal hemoglobin is crucial for you and me to have this conversation, transports blood, oxygen in the body, but sickle cell
Right,
hemoglobin doesn't do that job well enough. And the only fundamental difference between the two molecules is that sickle hemoglobin can oligomerize. So
right.
doing a PhD in that area got me broadly interested in protein aggregation disorders. And when I was just sort of moving on from a PhD to a postdoc during that last year phase, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, they were all getting super hot. So I'd
Mhm.
heard about sitting in India, and we didn't again have access to journals like you did at the tip of your fingers. It was library, go to the library, pull the journals out, and those kinds of things, right? And still, I had a notion of certain big names in the field, and in all my naivete, I mailed them to see if I could be a postdoc in their lab. I would get back very
Mhm.
responses from their managers saying, "Thank you very much for your interest. However, we have no positions open now." But
Mhm.
very interestingly, a second tier but very big name in the field of Parkinson's, Dr. Anthony Fink in UC Santa Cruz, he had a position, he had an opening. And I think he has had experience with Indian postdocs in his lab. And he knows that we're good workers. And he also knows
Right.
that we are just not working nonstop without applying a brain. We bring in even that brain component. So because of his experience, I don't know what it was. And like I said, back then, I didn't have an interview like this either. Some of my
Right.
friends had phone interviews. One of them got flown to Seattle to the institute that she was applying at, which was a rarity. It was
Right.
literally all via email. And then in between, he had an accident. So his manager got back to me saying that, "Hey, sorry, we've been silent, but we're very interested and we'd like for you to come for a postdoc." And then they send you paperwork and everything. So I go to Tony's lab. I get a 1 year appointment. Everything goes great. I'm under one other postdoc trying to figure out how things work there, what is the kind of tools they use, what are the kind of tools they use and stuff. And I get a second year extension. And then I
Mhm.
realized for the first time, I heard about what I call biopolitics. He's a big name in the field, and still he loses on one of his biggest NIH grants at that point. Or that's the sense I had.
Mhm.
So, and he was the department chair, chemistry and biochemistry chair. department head. And he had a whole bunch of postdocs that essentially got the lab ticking and got all those publications out. He had to let a whole bunch of us go, about 70% of us. And it was very easy for him to say goodbye to me because I'd only spent 1 year and 1.5 years with him. So he had some of the senior ones who had families that were dependent on them. So he had some thinking when he did this thing. And we were getting layoff and reappointment orders continuously, consecutively for 3-4 months. And even then, I had no realization that I'm on a J1 visa, which is a ridiculously tricky visa. And the second I don't have a position, I can essentially be kicked out by the immigration agents in principle. Right. So in a funny way, in a completely unplanned manner, I was almost in my head packing my bags and coming back to India because the couple of offers that I had then were not exciting. So I was like, I'm just going to come back to India and figure things out. A very dear friend of mine who stayed with me for some time in Santa Cruz kept telling me that I should go and talk to his mentor, who was the next door person who worked in the field of astrobiology. Okay. Super, right? I was always fascinated with astrobiology, but I had no clue that somebody with my training can actually be in that field, because Dave asked questions which were at the interface of chemistry and biology with a lot of chemistry in there. So because of my friend prodding, I finally went to talk to Dave, and the rest is history. Just kind of ended up joining for a postdoc with Dave, spent 4 years with Dave, fell in love with the field of astrobiology, which is an area that feeds off of a wide variety of other areas, including sciences like chemistry, physics, geology, planetary sciences, earth sciences, all over the place. Yeah, it feeds off of that. Yeah. The context is very vast. So after the 4 years, when I was in my third year in Dave's lab, I was like, I'm still not ready to start my lab. And at that point, I was beginning to think maybe I should join as a scientist in NASA Astrobiology Institute, because I didn't even want to deal with the notion of having to churn out PhD students or anything. I just wanted to have a nice, cozy project, a good proposal gets funded. I can have a couple of people who will help me out, and then we're a happy family, right? That was kind of the notion I had. I was on a visa. By then it had transitioned to an H-1B, and I did not want to get a green card. I don't know why, but I just didn't want to apply for a green card. And without a green card, you can't look at any jobs in NASA or related institutes. So then the stint there was going to get over. Dave, on the other hand, gave me a 6 months notice. He said, Sudha, I do not want to apply for this grant. He had a NASA grant going for a very long time, for 20 years or something, 20 plus years. He said, I'm done with this. I want to concentrate on something else. So what is it that you want to do with your life? And that's the first time I sat and thought about it seriously. I was like, what do I do? I love astrobiology. I can't be in an AI. I want to come back to India. I was actually planning then to make my way back in bits and pieces. From USA, move to Europe, spend a couple of years there, and then from there move from there to some other place, Singapore maybe, and do something like that, and come back slowly to India I think by the time I was 50. That was my notion in my mind at that time. And then I got this wonderful opportunity to do a postdoc in Harvard. And she had flown me out from California. I got to spend about 2-3 days with them, interviewed, had a lot of good discussions. I didn't know what anything meant. I just came back. I was like, let's see what happens. I came back, I landed, I literally got home from San Francisco airport, and I got the offer. So then I moved to Harvard. This was at the Center for Systems Biology, which just was one of those places which seals the deal for you with your decision making, right? So that place is systems biology, is an area of science which happens when people from multiple sciences come together and put their minds to a question. So there were theoretical physicists in my lab. There was a mathematician in my lab. Then there were a bunch of biochemists and hardcore biologists in the lab. And it just completely blew my mind what these kinds of collaborations can mean for answering questions. So between gaining more confidence after being thrown in another deep end, because you go to Harvard and you cannot escape the imposter syndrome. You just can't escape the imposter syndrome. You're surrounded by brilliance. And then you're like, thus far, was it just sheer luck that I came? I came this far in life and got through here? Or is there something more to all of this? Initially, it felt a little disconcerting, but it got better when I realized that I'm capable of more things and stuff. And those 4 years of training there, by the time I was into, say, 2.5 years, I knew I was ready to start a lab. Then I started applying for positions in India. And so what I'm trying to probably say is it might never be a straightforward journey for everybody. In my case, it was a complete shift of fields too. So there was a lot of going with the flow that happened for a long time, and decision making, serious decision making about what it is that I want to do full time with my career happened only around my 2.5 postdocs. I call myself a super postdoc because I'm one of those rare people who did a longish postdoc because of change of fields and astrobiology. Like I said, it feels like you're thrown in the deep end of the pool. And I was in my postdoc, so I had to do a second postdoc. So all of this meant I spent quite a bit of time with decision making. If people plan their lives a little better, this might not have to be this protracted. But having said that, I will not change anything ever, because I've just had the most wonderful journey, meandering all over the place and then finally finding my way here.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So all of the meandering was important.
Sorry, I didn't get the last thing.
I said all of the meandering was very important for my decision making. It helped. Every stage played a different role in helping me decide what it is that I wanted to do with my career.
Right. Wonderful. But as you said, you were not sure in the middle part that whether you wanted to be the person churning out PhDs from your lab. Transitioning from there to actually having a lab set up at IISER Pune and actually getting PhD students to enroll into your lab and starting a new lab with them, trying to figure out new research problems, writing grants. How was that initial phase of being a PI when suddenly people will be coming to you with their problems as probably you were going to someone a few years back?
You'd never stop going to someone in whatever stage of career you're at. I think you need to understand that. And nobody tells you that there's no diploma in being a lab PI, in being a, there's just no coursework one does. If you felt like you are getting thrown in the deep end of a pool when you're doing your PhD, postdoc, you're slightly better off, because PhD prepares you for a postdoc. Nothing prepares you to be a PI. Because being a PI means wearing multiple hats. So you get thrown in the deep end of the ocean. The only tools I had with me are my capacity to be able to ask questions in an articulated manner based on valid data or hypotheses. And to be able to interact with youngsters in the lab or people junior to me in the lab and mentor them. These were the only two skill sets I had with me. I'd never taught it, though I always knew that I wanted to incorporate some form of teaching. Surely didn't want to be a school teacher like my mother, bringing back all those hazar answer sheets to home and correcting and doing lesson plans. I just wanted it to be at a higher level. So I think this mentoring sealed it for me that, you know what, I enjoy talking to youngsters, intelligent youngsters who kind of completely you have an answer for them, and then they'll ask you a question based on that answer and you go, whoa, I don't know what to think about it. So it was it's super fun doing that. So then I thought maybe, I want to teach this crowd, this UG kind of a crowd. That'll be exciting. So with that notion and with some tools, I come give interview at a few places in India. IISERs are my top choice. IISER Mohali offered me first, followed by IISER Pune. For a few different reasons, I picked IISER Pune. I do feel like I would have been an equal fit in Mohali, but hey, I love it here and it's been great. I join in Feb. I join in precisely 20th Feb 2012. And it is sort of midway. It's Jan May semester shuru ho jata hai, your spring semester, right? So if there was a potential student who could have joined me, that person has already gone to somebody else. But having said that, there were few stragglers who were as starstruck about the notion of astrobiology as I was, though I didn't wear astrobiology much on my sleeve then. Only now I'm more comfortable in the last probably 5 or so years, more comfortable saying I'm an astrobiologist. We said we are biochemists who are interested in understanding the chemical origins of life, which comes under the broader umbrella of astrobiology. And there were a few of them who were interested in this, intrigued by this, and one of the first people to join me on this expedition is the famous Chaitanya Mungi. A lot of you probably know him. And Chaitanya did one of his rotations with me. Prior to that, he had already rotated with Sai and he had rotated with Nagraj, if I'm not wrong. And he joined me for a third rotation in April May exam hota hai, so May 2012, or just after the exams. And the rest is history. I think it's extremely important to have the first few students if they're really good, then that really changes the way how things might happen for you going forward. Chaitanya and
Right.
Neerja all joined me back to back. So they're almost my first two students, right? My first two babies
Right.
in the lab. So Chaitanya joined, then Neerja joined, and it just was an unbelievable journey of getting things together, trying to, both of them were doing two completely different projects. So had to get the two of them up to speed with the techniques, with the questions, and nobody trains in astrobiology at the bachelor's or master's level. So there is a steep
Right.
learning curve with regards to getting yourself familiar with the context. So there was all of that. It was just the three of us. So the three of us hung out constantly together, talked a lot, did a lot of chais together. So I think that is also this very beautiful thing. Your first few students end up becoming your very good friends too, if you get
Right.
along well. And the three of us got along very well. So we became very good friends, and they kind of set the tone for the lab, which decided almost, there were a lot of other astrobiology enthusiasts who wanted to be a part of the group. But somehow between the tone they set for the lab, and I think hearing about what it is like to be in this lab and work in this area, brought in more like-minded people. And I've been extremely lucky to find, to be able to have attracted very excited students who are genuinely excited for this field and who are very open to being thrown at the deep end of the pool, which is even more deeper than the regular deep end. And it's been fun thus far. Steep learning curve business in the first few years. And other than your teaching, I mean, of course, I never taught, right? So initially, I used to prepare for 1 hour of a class, I used to prepare for close to 8 hours, because you're constantly
Wow.
worried. You're like, oh no, if and I was the kind who went with the flow, right? So I did a lot of fun things in life. I had a lot of fun at every stage. So thoda fundamentals mein kabhi kabhi shakiness hota hai na. So I had to make sure
Right.
that my fundamentals are strong when I go out there in the class and talk. So a lot of that learning also happened during my preparation for classes. And yeah, it was very, very hectic, but it is an amazing experience. Then you have to wear the hat of a personnel manager as the lab size increases. Personnel, not personal, personnel manager. You have to deal with
Yeah.
people. You also have to do administrative roles. And before you know, your day is packed nonstop for 10 hours to 12 hours with things to do. But a lot of fun.
Right. 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 So you just said that it was 20th of Feb 2012. So I just realized you finished 9 years as a PI at IISER. So that's really wonderful.
Oh, yeah, I
And
know.
as you
Yes, I
said,
did.
yeah, and as you said that nobody teaches you how to be a PI, and getting along with people is very important when you start new lab and start working with your students. And this is something
Absolutely.
I've seen about you, and I've known you really close, that you are one person who believes in being friends with your students. And this brings me to the question of having hierarchy in the academic system, where some people do think that they are superior to their students, and there's a sense of hierarchy that you see even at the PhD level, even at the postdoc level sometimes. But I have seen that you always treat them as your colleagues, and you're always open to having criticism from them and have fun with them and have chai with them. How do you look at this aspect of academia?
You know, it's almost funny, Amogh. There is there is a whole bunch of them that are like me, and there's a whole bunch of them that believe in this hierarchy thing, right? And if you kind
Right.
of take this whole bunch of us, at least even from IISER, if you did that, like all of my faculty colleagues, and look at all of us closely, some things that emerge are the culture that is perpetuated in that area of science.
Hmm.
I'm going to say certain things that might sound a little controversial, but I'm going to use chemistry as an example. There is this, and this is not relevant just to India, it's relevant to chemistry spaces across the world.
Yeah,
Historically,
exactly.
it's been an old boys club. Biology somewhere down the line veered away from this old boys club mentality, though I'm not trying to say it's absolutely non-existent in biology, but somehow
Hmm.
chemistry across the country and the world actually seems to still have this structure where hierarchy seems to be very important.
Right.
I feel like, dil mein respect hai to kafi hai, and you earn that respect. You can never command respect. The
Right.
second you wish to command respect, I think it's over. There's no respect there, period. You earn people's respect. And just because you're an
Hmm.
open person, you're a a person who's readily available to have a conversation that's outside of the realm of your area of scientific expertise doesn't mean that you're going to be opening up a Pandora's box or anything. There is a fine balance that you have to maintain. That is for sure. Yeah. I mean, a student needs to also understand that there is this one kind of a line, but it's a very fine line. One doesn't have to kind of build giant walls. And it is extremely crucial. And this is my genuine feeling about all of this. And this is Dave Deemer, my spiritual mentor in the field, with whom I did my first postdoc. When I said, Dr. Deemer, he said, "Why are you calling me Dr. Deemer? Just call me David. David Deemer, Dave." It took me a while to get used to that. While I was in NII, we had 3 teachers. One is Satyajit Rath, the other one is Vinita, who's also coincidentally my colleague here at IISER Pune, and the third is Anna. The 3 of them are immunologists, and they worked at IISER Pune together as a very close team. The 3 of them wouldn't respond to you if you call them sir or ma'am. And it blew my socks at that, because till then you're calling everybody sir and ma'am. And you talked about hierarchy at PhD level, right? I saw that at Madras University, where I did my master's. I'm a master's student. PhD students in the department demanded that we call them sir and ma'am. And we were a group of people who said, screw you, we will not. I'm sorry, we exactly did this. So we never did. We never called them sir or ma'am, which essentially meant the whole bunch of them hated us. And we were a very tight-knit large group of girls and guys always hanging out together. And we became such a big hit that people from other departments were hanging out with us. And I think they were slowly challenging this norm of calling people sirs and ma'ams. You command respect, right? There was only one gentleman there who was doing his PhD with the HOD, then HOD of the department, and that man commanded our respect. To date, he's a very dear friend of mine. I call him sir, but I called him on my own volition. He didn't ask me. So there is that difference. And I think this whole notion of somebody respecting you only if you have this hierarchy in place, I think it's a really, it's a notion I can't relate to at all. But having said that, I feel like this is something that people should be sensitized to in the various areas of sciences, that it's okay to be colleagues. It's very important to be colleagues first. And it's very important to be able to take criticism. Nobody's perfect. And my mother tells me, now it's different, but very early on, when I was even more of a bigger dynamite and stuff, I didn't do very well with criticism at all. It is a learning process. You learn to accept the fact that you are not perfect, and you learn from somebody all the time. And that's the truth. Even if then I was much more of a hot-headed person, with time, you mature, you mellow down, you learn all of these things. Why that doesn't happen in certain other areas of science, I do not know. But I mean, our director is an example, Professor Jayant Udgankar. He wants to be called Jayant by the colleagues in the field and by students. So it's something that helps with breaking that wall. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that'll be a first step.
Yeah, exactly. And moving with this to a connected topic, when I'm talking about PI being friends or taking his or her students as colleagues, does it become easier to understand the PhD struggle that they are going through? Because you, as a person, you have gone through that PhD struggle in your time. And then when you become a PI, you can relate much more to that PhD struggle, because in the last few years, there is this pressure. But at the same time, you are yourself going through some pressures of grants. You're writing grants, you're writing papers getting rejected. You're in the middle of some extensive administrative work, and you are at heart a researcher. So amidst all this chaos, does it really help when you are a friend to your student?
Any day, because see, it becomes so much more easier for me to say, this is a bad time to have this conversation because I'm going through this, and this. Can we talk about this later if this is not very urgent? And this tells 2 things. One, I'm interested in what you want to talk to me about. However, I'm going through crap, so this is not probably a good. But I really do want to hear about it. So it also communicates the empathy angle, right? You want to listen to them, but they also know that, now probably it's not, because things might go south if we have this conversation now. So let's do it a little later. So yes, it makes a world difference when you are more of a colleague. You are a colleague. And one should remember that if there aren't students, there's no lab. In India, predominantly labs run thanks to students, not thanks to postdocs. The postdoc phenomenon is just getting better in India now. It's getting better, and I think IISER, we have at least 60 postdocs now. Yeah? I have one in the lab, but that's one person. The predominant chunk is grad students, and without graduate students, PhD students, IPhD and PhD students. So they are central to the functioning of the lab. So it's extremely crucial to have a very healthy working relationship, and it's also very crucial to go beyond this healthy working relationship and make yourself available to be sure that you communicate to them that you're there for them. It's not going to be easy, right? PhD, that acronym stands for a lot of different things other than what it's supposed to stand for, right? So it is not an easy journey. PhD is fundamentally, to me, I think PhD builds patience. If you survive it, you develop a lot of patience for a lot of things. But going through that journey, you might not be able to appreciate what might be at the end of it. Because certain times you're in the thick of a situation and you feel like, I just want to drop it and leave. This happened to me in my PhD. I probably was beginning to flirt with the notion of wanting to quit it. Because 1.5 years, I was going after a problem. And it just wouldn't work. I was trying to make this peptide. I was trying to put 2 unnatural amino acids in a place close to each other, and it just wouldn't tolerate it. So my PhD supervisor, Dr. Roy had the foresight to say, this is when I say, Sudha, stop, we'll start focusing on another project. Let's get back this at a later stage. So Roy was not Sudha, but Roy made sure that he talked to us on an everyday basis. I'm more friends with Professor Roy now, when I'm more of an equal. It wasn't the same when I was a student with him, but he was a gentleman who spent every day talking for some time with us. General chatter, science ke bare mein, some other things and those kinds of stuff. So what I always knew is I could walk up to him and say, you know what, this is not working for me. So he made sure that he knew that I could do that. Even though he probably might never realize it, that he communicated that vibe to me. He very much did that. He was not my friend then, but he very much made sure that I knew that I could go and talk to him at any point in time. And he'll always kind of say, how's it going? How are you? And he kind of checked in on you in his own style, in his own inimitable style. It was very different from Sudha. But I think that is very important, to let your students know that you're there for them. Right. And that is something that will completely change the way your student will handle their crisis. Right. Otherwise, it will become very easy to say, I want to drop it and leave.
Right. It's a universal problem that you mentioned, that all of us feel at some point of our PhD that it's better to quit. Let me just drop this and just leave. And
I think it's most of us.
And to another connected point, as you said, becoming a PI is not something that is taught. You come across a group of people from very diverse backgrounds working in one environment. It is going to happen that they will have fights amongst themselves, or they are not going to go along very well with each other. As a PI, being in that position of power or authority in some sense, how do you look at resolving these issues? To what extent do you think it's a good idea to get involved, and how to make sure that overall, on a general basis, the lab environment stays very healthy and very nice?
Personally for me, and it should be this way for everyone, it is absolutely crucial to have a healthy environment in the lab. Otherwise, it's going to be everyone. At the level of human interactions, at the level of the quality of science that happens, at the level of the kind of ethical practices that you might practice in the lab. Otherwise, if you do not have a healthy environment in the lab, everything can get systematically affected. Yeah. How do I handle conflicts? Conflicts exist. It's human. I fight with my mom so much. It just happens. It's very human, right? It is human to disagree, and it is going to happen in your lab too. And I think it's very important to hear both sides of the story. and then bring the two of them together and hear the whole thing all over again. And many a times what ends up happening is that they realize that there was a lot of lost in translation happening, or they realize that I misunderstood something, or they realize that no, everything happened for a certain reason and we need to figure a way out. We can talk about things. We're all mature adults. We should be able to have conversations which are uncomfortable. And I think and this is where you set the tone for this in your lab. You say that it's important to be open about these discomforts. No two people are going to get along like a house on fire. Not everybody is. Any random two people in the lab might become very close and then hang out the most and all that stuff, right? But overall, I don't know. I think one of the things I insist is please do chais together. It's extremely important. Take the other undergrads in the lab also with you. And only in the last, I think, year, it's been a little more difficult. I mean, minus COVID and stuff, it's been a little more difficult for me to go out with them for chai very, very regularly. But I still even pre-COVID, twice a week chai was mandatory. Post JC, we did a journal club every week. Post lab meeting happened on 2 different days. So these two mandatory. Other than that, they will just speak and say, hey, Sudha, do you want to come out for chai? I mean, this just happened like yesterday. She peeked in and said, we're going for chai, you want to come? I'm like, I had too many chais. I have some deadline. Sorry, I'll not join. But otherwise, I'll just run. I mean, I don't say no to chai very easily. I feel like these kinds of interactions facilitate more understanding of the human that you are. And it's crucial to keep this thing going in the lab. And I don't know, I see some faculty doing this regularly with their students. I can't understand why more faculty don't do this often, because it's super crucial for the general well-being of the lab, for making sure that the people of the lab are overall content with what's happening. Like I said, we're going to always have our differences, but we should know that we can talk about it and sort them out.
Right. That's wonderful to know how you look at it, because in my view, being a PI is very similar to being a parent in some sense. It's like an academic parent who's going to scold you when you do the wrong things, want to guide you in the amidst struggles and everything. This was good to know that how easy or difficult it is to be a PI, from going from PhD to postdoc to becoming a PI. And I'm going to end the conversation with a very important topic about, in fact, two important things. One is about reaching out to the public, which you enjoy doing, science outreach.
Yeah.
And secondly is about women in STEM. You are one of the role models for young female students who want to be in this kind of a career, or want to start their own labs, but they have various issues, right from personal issues, family issues, to getting positions, to there are various issues different for different individuals. So I would like to know your thoughts about these two things, science outreach and women in STEM.
I'll start off with science outreach first. Science outreach is very close to my heart. I've realized that, I realized this very early on, that I like to share my science with folks who don't belong to our area of research at all, right? With everybody. But particularly what I learned after coming back to IISER and getting involved with exciting science group very early on is that I thoroughly enjoy talking to young people. It's unbelievable. The lesser you have been in the academic system, the more challenging the questions are. I feel like the longer you have been in the educational system in India or in any other part of the world, conditioning becomes more and more. Very early on, you're asking the most fundamental of questions without any fear, without any notion of log kya sochenge. And that kind of happens with, the younger the crowd, the better, right? So I think one of the most mind-blowing questions, top 3 mind-blowing questions I've gotten in any outreach talk was from a 5th grader. And it was like, whoa, how do you even think about this at this age, right? But that's the kind of environment his family has provided for him. They keep bringing him out to exciting science group, probably from when he was 3 years old or something, when he didn't understand anything. But anyways, what I very quickly realized is I would like to engage with students. So typical, a chunk of my science outreach involves dealing with middle high school students, and another chunk deals with undergrads. One of the other important responsibilities I feel like I have is to also make sure that students know what it is to take up science as a career. There are a lot of notions about what can you do after you're done with a degree, a certain degree, right?
Exactly.
And I grew up in Hyderabad where the only two valid degrees were medicine or engineering.
Yeah.
And आपकी बेटी BSc कर रही है, and then the tone falls flat like that, right? So there is this like, yeah, whatever, you're doing another BA, another BSc. There's a lot of misconceptions about what people can do after a certain degree or cannot do after a certain degree. And parents have these misconceptions in like kgs. So it's extremely important to make sure that you are engaging with this younger population and reminding them that there are all these possibilities. It's pretty much, I will say, there are just lots of options once you get into science. Doing what I'm doing is not the end of life. There's a lot of other things you can do. You can do science communication, you can do science education, you can do science outreach. Yeah, you can, if thinking about how to get students excited about science is what sort of gets you ticking, like what got Chaitanya Mungi ticking. He's moved to science education. He loves to think about pedagogy. And these are the kinds of multiple options that exist. There's science administration, science policy. So I feel like by engaging with students in particular, I'm at least trying to dispel the kind or provide them prior information before they start getting all these other inputs that science karne ke baad kuch aur nahi hai types, na? What will you do? Some average job. I think that is extremely important to kind of, it's important to make sure that you kind of talk to them and dispel those kind of potential seeds of misconception also that might be there. One other thing I really enjoy doing is talking to non-scientists. And one of the exciting things I did in that realm is this thing called Science on Tap series. And it's so much fun. You basically, the whole environment is set in a bar where something can be served on tap, pretty much, bar and restaurant kind of place. And general public comes to the place, general public who are interested in science. So over a very informal setting, you talk to them about what gets you ticking as a scientist, what gets you ticking as an astrobiologist in my case, and why do you ask the questions that you ask, and how do you think about these things, how do you address them, so on and so forth. And the kind of conversations then that happens after that is really, really very interesting. The other very exciting that I did as part of an outreach thing, it is very sad that we have done only one version of this. And Nagraj and I have to get together along with this other gentleman to see how we can make this happen again. We did something called Dinner with Einstein. I will say it should be renamed Dinner for Einstein. But yeah, it was called Dinner with Einstein. And here, some families signed up to host some of us. About 5-6 of us were part of the initial experiment. It is based on the story that Einstein went on to do what he did because of these weekly conversations that happened with him and a PhD student who worked with his, father, I think, in the university. Every Thursday or something, he would come home and talk about his work, discuss science, and that kind of initially got Einstein very curious about science, and essentially the rest is history, right? So the idea was very similar. So I went to about 5-6 different houses, and the setting was chosen to be what it is because the child is most comfortable in an environment known to them. So any of notions of I might ask a stupid question or anything is also kind of, all of that is gone down. And also the parent is around, or the parents are around, to be able to ask some of the questions and stuff. One of the things I will do differently in the second round is make sure that the parents come into the picture after the first 1 hour of interaction. Otherwise, they take over the interaction. So that is something we do differently. But this was one of the other outreach things that we did, which was very, very exciting. And I hope we can do this again. And we try to involve some senior grad students, but very quickly other concerns of, you're sending a person out to somebody else's house. So one needs to think about certain other things. Location of the house, if it's too far away, I'm putting them at, is there a security risk just getting to that place, or other things also, right? So it kind of took a backseat, and then COVID and all happened and it just vanished. But science outreach, I think, is super crucial. Every faculty should do it. I really do not understand why more scientists do not engage with the society. I mean, we exist because of the funding that comes in from the society. So it's extremely crucial
Right.
for us to re-engage with them and say, hey, this is where your money is going. So I feel like this is an onus on the scientific community to do more outreach, to engage more with people from various demographics in terms of age groups and stuff. Unfortunately, it still is not happening to the extent that it should. But I still feel IISER is one of the few places where at least a good nucleus of us are very serious about this. And now we also have the Center of Excellence in Science, Science and Math Education. And there's a lot of outreach possibilities that even that is facilitating, and having even a IRO in the first place, International Research and Outreach Office, sends a big message saying that we're serious about our outreach. So I think it's getting better, but more places need to do this. And then you said women in STEM.
Yes.
Yeah. You were very gracious with your words there. I'm not sure how much of a role model I am, but having said that, the truth of the matter is it is non-trivial to be a part of this journey, particularly as a woman. There are lots of other societal, personal, and other kinds of hurdles that come in the way. So for a woman, it becomes that much more difficult in comparison to a man, particularly in Indian context. But it's not very different even outside of India. Just the flavors of the problems are a little different, but there are several least common denominators all across the place. And I feel like every institute, now the government mandates an institute to have an internal complaints committee in place so that we systematically address certain problems that are unique to women, and they know that there is a forum that they can take it to so that they can kind of be addressed in a very rigorous manner. I think this also changed the way, is beginning to change the way how we address these issues. I can't remember an ICC when I was in NII. I can't. But it came soon after. The Vishaka guidelines actually mandated it. So though there were people that I could go and talk to if there was ever a problem, right? I knew that this person was approachable in that context, or these set of people I could go to and talk to. I also think the onus is on the supervisor to make sure that this is something that they enforce in their labs, which is to make the environment friendly for everyone. Not sort of have any kind of bias for a certain person who belongs to a certain gender or has a certain sexual preference. Be sure to make it explicit right at the get-go that you are a very inclusive space. Your space. Make sure that this is a message that goes out, right? And once you do that, automatically the other issues that can crop up becomes much less. But I do know, and this is something that got dealt with in the Kalpa magazine, right? They had a big piece on this about certain instances in IISER itself, and it exists. It exists even at the level of faculty members. It's just so deeply ingrained in our psyche, this whole business, that it is, despite people being very conscious about it at higher levels and stuff, it is still there. A snide comment here, a very, what do you call that? Holier than thou attitude ke saath ek comment there, or something. It just kind of comes in different intensity. It comes with different intensity in different forms and stuff. It's extremely important to call a spade right then and there and say this is not okay. And then it's also very important to make sure that you showcase role models who have been there, done that, have been on this journey, have gone through things, have experienced things possibly. Not everybody goes through a very difficult situation. The difficulty might vary on a sliding scale from 1 to 10. It could differ. But it becomes extremely important to talk about everybody's journey and make sure that women realize that women, and I will just not stop it with women, gender minorities and other minorities, but there are solutions to the problem that you are experiencing. You just don't have to feel like you are all alone, and you just don't have to feel like you're being specially targeted. This is a much more pervasive issue, and there's a way we can handle this. There's a way we can solve this issue. Yeah. And one of the first one of the recent steps at IISER is to, they've kind of put together a women in science committee. And we are having our first event on International Women's Day, where I facilitated this panel discussion to talk about how to do science in unprecedented times. And the idea is to constantly have events over the course of the year that showcases role models that can come and talk about their own journeys, that wherein they ran into certain issues and how did they circumvent those problems. What were the things that worked for them? Because different people, different tools, and you might relate to one tool and somebody else might relate to another of that. So I think it's very important to expose your own community of women and other minorities to the stories that exist out there, so that they know that, it is possible. We've been there. It can happen. Problems can be dealt with.
Right. Yeah, it's wonderful to know that you think that two things. Firstly, about science outreach, that it's on the onus is on the scientists to actually take the science to the society and put it out there, that this is where your money is being invested. And
Absolutely.
as you said about the psyche in the society, we often see, like from 10th grade coming through PhD, at different levels, girls do drop out from their education for different various reasons. And even at the highest level, you're saying there are problems. So trying to figure out solutions at all times is a very, very important step that one can take going ahead, in my view.
Yeah, and it's very important to align yourself with the place. And this is something you might want to look out for when you're looking for for a job where you want to sort of spend quite a bit of time. I think it's extremely important for you, and this is, I'm speaking to every human, man, woman, otherwise it doesn't matter, whatever your preference is. I think it's extremely important to try and assess if a place is going to be inclusive, because that will speak volumes about what your experience will be in that place. By default, if a place is inclusive, a lot of other things become almost implicit in terms of their what kind of processes they have put in place to deal with workplace issues, so on and so forth, because they have put a lot of thought into it. And this is a flavor you'll get when you're interviewing. So I think it's extremely crucial to check if a place is inclusive. If not, if it's not very obvious to you, openly ask them, what are the options, and are there committees which deal with this and these issues, and so on and so forth. I think it's important to know that before you get into that place.
Yeah, that's really important. Well, Sudha, thank you so much for being on this show. And as I said, you are a true role model. I can talk to you as a friend. I know that every time.
Yes, you
can. And there are so many of your students, of people who know you in IISER. They know that they can come to you and talk to you as a friend. And that is, I think, one of the greatest things that you bring to the setup of having no hierarchy between a professor and his or her students. It was great to know your journey from PhD to PI, and I'm sure that people realize that it's easy to say that my supervisor is not helping me or not doing things. There are things that they are really going through themselves, and there are problems that they have on their own, and yet they have to be sure that they are there for you to help you out. So it was good to know your side of the story as a PI, and I'm sure more and more people will realize the importance of being colleagues in the academic setup, treating each other equal, and helping out everyone to go through the struggles.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And no thanks for embarrassing me to no end towards the end, but it was wonderful being on the show. Thank you. I mean, being on this, I don't know what to call it, a chat. Yeah, having this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
All right. So that was Professor Dr. Sudha Rajamani, Deputy Chair at IISER Pune, and we heard her story from PhD to PI. And as we had said that we often think that the grass is greener on the other side, but it might be true that somebody is rigorously taking effort and watering it all throughout, and that's why it looks green. Uh, we will bring few more interesting stories this season on different aspects of PhD and academia in general. So stay tuned. We are taking a break for the next week, and we will be back in the second week of March with another exciting story. Till then, do take care of yourself, treat people with more care and love. And still, the pandemic is going on in some sense, so take proper care, wear masks, sanitize regularly. एंड एज आई ऑलवेज से जो भी हो रहा है दुनिया में जितना भी नेगेटिविटी चल रही है उस सब में बस बने रहिए टेक केयर गुड बाय